Fortnite has been around for over 7 years, and in that time, it's brought us things that players loved, and others they couldn't stand. So today, we're breaking down the most loved versus most hated things in Fortnite, starting with one of the most controversial additions ever, the mechs. When these dropped in Chapter 1 Season X, the entire Fortnite community lost their minds, and not in a good way. The mechs were basically walking tanks that could stomp, shoot missiles, and delete builds in seconds. People were rage quitting, pros were tweeting at Epic daily, and hashtag remove the mechs trended across the internet. Many argued that these were unfair and took no skill to use, so Epic nerfed them, but even after that, they were still hated by players, and fans were relieved to see them go once the season ended. But moving on to something players loved, next we have the Infinity Gauntlet. This was our first ever Marvel collab in Fortnite, and it's safe to say that this one did not disappoint. After picking up the gauntlet, you would transform into Thanos, giving you abilities like Punch, Ground Pound, Laser, and Super Jump. While it was arguably more overpowered than the mechs, the reason why players liked this one more was because it was a part of an LTM, not breaking the regular modes. To this day, this is one of the most memorable collabs, and hopefully this LTM will come back someday. But one thing no one wants to come back are the makeshift weapons from Fortnite Primal. Instead of finding a good weapon off the ground, Fortnite suddenly decided you should build one yourself, using crafting parts and animal bones. The idea sounded cool on paper, but in reality, it was just frustrating. The makeshift weapons had horrible accuracy, did little damage, and couldn't be used at range, making these some of the worst weapons of all time. I guess Fortnite should have just stuck with the classics, which brings us to our next item, the OG Scar. In early Fortnite, this was the best and most desired weapon, being one of the few legendaries in the game. This thing was a beast, shredding through builds, hitting for 97 headshot damage, and had the most satisfying sounds. You knew when someone had a scar, and you definitely didn't want to be on the other end of it. Although it's had its ups and downs, going through many nerfs and buffs throughout the years, it's still pretty solid in Fortnite OG today, having the classic sound and weapon model and doing 70 headshot damage. No matter how many weapons come and go, the Scar will always be a fan favorite. It's not as overpowered as the next weapon though, because next we have the Infinity Blade. This was the second mythic to be added to the game after the Infinity Gauntlet, and it was one of the most broken items in Fortnite's entire history. If you weren't around during Season 7, you might not know how chaotic this thing was. It was a mythic melee weapon that gave you massive health and shield, let you leap across the map, and could tear through structures and players with ease. It was so overpowered, it ended up ruining a tournament, and this was one of Fortnite's biggest controversies at the time, and Epic ended up vaulting it just days after its release, and to this day, it's never come back. But there have been some overpowered things that players loved, which brings us to the Double Pump. This feature was a fan favorite in early Fortnite, and for years, players waited for its return, and with the addition of Fortnite OG, it finally happened. This trick allows you to shoot your shotgun twice as fast by holding 2 and swapping each time you shoot, dodging the wait between shots. Players were happy to see it come back in Fortnite OG, for now at least. In Chapter 1, Fortnite removed it in Season 5 by adding a delay between shots, so enjoy it while it lasts. But one thing players were actually happy to see removed was Tilted Town. In Season X, Fortnite remixed a ton of old locations, but each of them had a twist, and for Tilted, they gave it a Wild West theme, with the gimmick being that you couldn't build. It was basically like a forced version of Zero Build, and players hated when the end game would force them into this area. Thankfully, it wasn't in the game for long, being replaced with Gotham City a little over a month later. While fans hated Tilted Town, it was probably because Tilted Towers is one of the most loved locations of all time. From the moment that it dropped in Chapter 1, Tilted was the hot drop. If you wanted action, you landed Tilted, and if you made it out of Tilted without getting eliminated, you'd have the best loot in the lobby. It was chaotic, competitive, and packed with loot, which made it a favorite for casuals and pros alike. Every time Epic removed Tilted, players begged for it to come back, and it's become Fortnite's most iconic location. These days, it might not be as packed, but that's probably because of one big change to Fortnite. That brings us to something players hate: bots and skill-based matchmaking. Originally, Fortnite threw everyone into the same pool: noobs, sweats, and everyone in between. But now, with skill-based matchmaking and lobbies full of bots, matches feel less alive and way more predictable. You either stomp through a bunch of bots or get thrown into sweaty build battles with somebody who plays like it's a cash cup. A lot of players feel it breaks the immersion and makes the game feel less competitive. You know when you're fighting a bot and it's just not as satisfying. It used to be a few bots here and there, but now in Fortnite OG, some players are seeing lobbies with just 8 real players and 92 bots, making victory royales feel way less rewarding. But next, we have something a little more fun: Clombo. Players were pleasantly shocked to see Clombo added to the game in Chapter 3, as it was a really cool addition, and at the time we hadn't seen anything like it. You could give Clombo an exotic item, and in return he'd give you a legendary, or you could use him for mobility. They were generally friendly as long as you didn't attack them first, and players quickly grew to like them. Sadly though, they weren't in the game for long, as they were vaulted at the start of Chapter 3 Season 2, and have only come back in Fortnite Lego. But something players were glad to see removed were the boss cars from Fortnite Wrecked. Wrecked was one of the most unique seasons of all time, because the meta this season was basically just sitting in a car. Not only did the vehicles have a ton of health, but they also had attachments like rocket launchers, turrets, and spike bumpers. On top of that, the map was packed with slurp cactuses, repair pads, nitro boosts, and unlimited fuel, making these cars practically unstoppable. Because of this, it was nearly impossible to play without jumping in a car, which pushed a lot of players over to Fortnite Reload instead. While Epic was clearly trying to spice things up, the community just didn't vibe with the updates to cars, and honestly, most were happy to see them go. But something players did not want to see removed is Spider-Man's web shooters. These were added at the start of Chapter 3 and instantly became one of the best mobility items Fortnite has ever added. On top of having 80 swings and 0 fall damage, each swing would take you way farther than a traditional grappler, and the lock-on made it much easier to find a target to attach to. They were fast, fun, and just felt amazing to use, and to this day, players still want them to come back. But not all superhero items are loved, because next we have the superhero skins. These were added to the game in Chapter 2 Season 4, ironically the Marvel season, and these quickly became popular with the sweatiest players. Players realized you could use this outfit in either all black to blend in with shadows or all white to blend in with snow, and it quickly gained tryhard status for being super overpowered. Fortnite did eventually patch this, but throughout the years there's been a ton of easy workarounds, and you can still get something similar to this day. If we're being honest, we've all been taken out by this outfit hundreds of times, and that's probably why so many people hate it. That same season, we also saw the addition of Stark Industries, and this location went on to be a fan favorite. It dropped right into the center of the map during Chapter 2 Season 4, and was packed with loot, mythic weapons, and intense fights. The futuristic design made this location stand out, and of course, it was home to Iron Man, who dropped one of the strongest mythics in the game. Not only could you get his repulsors and unibeam, but most importantly, you could get the Stark Industries energy rifle. It felt like a true Marvel crossover, not just a skin or emote, and whether you were landing there for the mythics or just looking for action, Stark Industries was the place to be that season. To this day, players still rank it as one of the best locations of all time. But next, we have one of the most hated things from Chapter 1, planes. While a lot of players look back fondly on Chapter 1 Season 7, at the time, the planes were one of the biggest reasons fans didn't like the season. Sure, they were great for mobility, but they were completely overpowered. They came with mounted guns that could shred through builds, and the planes themselves had a ton of health. On top of that, if things got too chaotic, you could just jump out and glide away thanks to glider redeploy, meaning there was basically no downside to using them. All of this led to players camping in the air for entire games, making fights feel unfair and way less competitive. But next, we have a mobility item that everyone loves, the Launchpad. The Launchpad is hands down one of Fortnite's most iconic items, and ever since it was introduced, players have always been happy to see it return. It was the perfect way to rotate out of storm, escape a fight, or third party from above, and because you could place it like a trap, it fit seamlessly into build fights. Unfortunately, you can't find it in regular modes, but in Reload and OG, it's still one of the best things you can carry. Simple, effective, and always clutch, the Launchpads are just one of those items that never go out of style. But the next items aren't disliked for being overpowered, they're hated for being annoying. The toxic emotes. You're doing great, you have a few kills, some good loot, and you're ready to try for a victory royale. You get sniped and eliminated instantly. Then you hear this. Whether it's laugh it up or take the L, there's nothing more rage-inducing than getting hit with one of the most disrespectful emotes in the game. Let's be honest, they're the ultimate troll. While toxic emotes might make your blood boil, the next thing had everyone hyped the moment it showed up. Kevin the Cube. In Chapter 1 Season 5, Fortnite added a random cube to hype up what was coming the next season. Nobody knew what it was, where it was going, or why it was even there. It was a complete mystery, and that's why players loved it, with the community eventually naming the cube Kevin. Players followed it every step of the way, watching as it left runes, powered up locations, and eventually dissolved into Loot Lake, turning it into a giant bounce pad. Kevin wasn't just a cube, it became a character, showing up in multiple seasons, events, and even being a key part of the storyline. But next, we have a storyline event that left most players feeling disappointed. Fracture. This was supposed to be the big finale for Chapter 3, and after the hype of past events like the End or Galactus, expectations were sky high. But for most fans, Fracture just didn't deliver. Instead of an epic battle or high stakes action, players spent most of the event running around doing random tasks like collecting orbs. It felt more like a mini event than a live finale. There was barely any combat, and a lot of people were left scratching their heads when it was over. But finally, we have the most iconic character in Fortnite history, Jonesy. From the very beginning, Jonesy has basically been the face of Fortnite. Whether it's the OG default, Agent Jones, or Bunker Jonesy, this guy has done it all. He's been in trailers, live events, cutscenes, and even played a huge role in the storyline. Jonesy went from just being a basic default skin to a full-on hero in the Fortnite universe. No matter how many new characters Fortnite adds, Jonesy will always be the original. But that was the most loved versus most hated things in Fortnite, and if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like the one on screen now, and I'll see you there.